Alright, first and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Ba'adash, and double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me the truth. Another week in, week out, doing the work and prophesying, what is going to happen in the future. Speaking about the prophecies, breaking down the doctrine, and, staying on top of relevant news that is tied to what the Bible speaks of. So today's camp, I wanted to start off going into Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, okay? Because this chapter essentially goes into, why you see what you're seeing right now, why you see brothers out there prophesying, on the downtowns, live streaming, making videos talking about the Israelites. This is not a coincidence, right? It was written that this was going to happen in the end days. So when we go into Ezekiel chapter 37, Ezekiel chapter 37, it goes into the valley of the dry bones. So I'll start at the top. It goes into, the hand of Yahweh was upon me and carried me out in the spirit of Yahweh and set me down in the midst of the valley which was full of bones, and caused me to pass by them round about, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. And he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Yahweh, thou knowest. And when you go into that, let's talk about the Israelites being in a dead state, not knowing who they are today, would refer to themselves as Latinos, Negroes, Native Americans, and majority of those people are Israelites. Not every single one of them, same as not every single so-called white person is an Edomite, right? The majority of them are. So when it's talking about the valley of the dry bones, it's talking about the spiritually dead Israelites. It says, and he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Yahweh, thou knowest. Again he said unto me, Prophesy upon these bones, and say unto them, O you dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus saith Yahweh unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live. Right? So the prophesying unto these bones goes to exactly that, right? Prophesying onto our people. And it said that the breath was going to come back into them, and that eventually they're going to stand upon their own feet, as we read down below. So verse 6 says, And I will lay sinews upon you, and will bring flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live, and you shall know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied there was a noise, and behold a shaking, and the bones came together, bone to his bone. And when I beheld, lo, the sinews and the flesh came up upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there is no breath in them. Right? And when you go into the breakdown of what that's talking about, it says that, he was breathing upon these bones, but only the flesh was upon them. Right? It says the skin came upon them, but there was no breath in. I think it should be good now. So I was saying the skin being upon them and not the breath goes into our people roughly about 30 years ago, right? The so-called Latinos, the Negroes, and Native Americans, they started coming together, realizing that these Edomites are the problem, but it wasn't in the form of righteousness. For example, you had the Latinos, the Latinx, and then you had, the Black Panthers, and you had all these groups realizing that the problem is the system. That was the skin come upon them, the bones, but not the breath, because it wasn't done in, righteousness, which that would eventually happen in the future, which is what's happening right now. So when you jump down, it says, Then said he unto me, Prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, son of man, and say to the wind, Thus saith Yahweh, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these plain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding exceeding great army. And that is what we're witnessing right now, is that the Lord has his men out there prophesying, putting that breath upon the Israelites, and they're waking up. Okay, they're waking up to who they are. We're waking up to what's going to happen in the future. And there's nothing, these nations, anyone can do to stop it. Now, one thing I want to touch on is, how do we know this is talking about this time? Well, you have to go to Revelation. You go to Revelation chapter 11, right? And it talks about Babylon the Great, once again, being America. And when you go into this, Revelation chapter 11 and verse 11, it says, "And after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from Yahweh entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them." Which says the exact same thing when you read Ezekiel 37 that is being talked about. Right after the 3 days and a half goes into 350 years being enslaved here, and that eventually we'd wake up to who we are. So one more time it says, "And after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from Yahweh entered into them, and they stood up upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them." Right? Because once these, top banking families, the elites, as they call them, they see our people waking up, they know that their kingdom is about to start going down. Because they understand the prophecies. They have their scholars, their people that have searched things out. Right? As it says, that the children of darkness are wiser than the children of light. Going into how the Esau Edom today knows more than your average Israelite. So he searched out all these things when it comes to the scriptures. It's just that, as it says, the pride of thine heart had deceived thee. Right? They think that they can somehow outwit the Most High and, not have these things happen. So when they see us waking up, they know that eventually, their kingdom is right around the corner, because that's what the prophecy said. So it says, and then it goes into the salvation in Revelation 11. That's the point. Let's go back to Ezekiel 37 now. Ezekiel 37, one more time. "So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood up upon their feet, an exceeding great army." So the Great Awakening, which when you go into Baruch, the 2nd chapter, it talks about how we're going to wake up in all the places where we've been scattered. I'm going to get that, but first I want to touch on the point of the scriptures talk about how we're going to forget who we are. So, that's part of the whole story, is that, you read Deuteronomy 28, it talks about how if you don't obey these commandments, all these curses shall come upon you as a nation. And that's exactly what happened. And part of those curses says in verse 64 that we're going to be scattered throughout all 4 corners of the earth and made to worship other gods made out of wood and stone. Part of that also is that we're going to forget who we are. And that is exactly what has happened. So when you go into Jeremiah 17, that's where it says that. In Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 4, it says, "And thou even thyself shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not, for ye have kindled a fire in mine anger which shall burn forever." Right? So we're going to discontinue from our heritage, which means forget who we are. Okay, that's why when you look at every single nation, the only people that don't know their full-on history is the so-called Latinos and natives, Native Americans. Latinos, Negroes, Native Americans. All we were taught at school is that we were just a bunch of slaves, and that's as far as they go. They don't go into the history of how we came over here, after the Assyrian captivity. They don't talk about that, but it's well documented. Cristobal Colon, or Christopher Columbus, that's how he knew about the Americas. When you go into his journals, he knew about the Americas because it was written in Esdras that the Israelites came over here, the Northern Kingdom. Right, so they don't talk about that history in school. They just say that, oh, coincidentally, he was just, looking for India, and he, stumbled across the Americas. Complete fable. So they don't speak about that. They don't speak about how, the Negroes, their true history, how all of so-called Europe during the so-called Dark Ages was really being ruled by Israelites, right? The Moors. The Moors are Israelites that believed in Islam, right? So they don't, if you were to search up right now, the wild men and the Moors, you'd find a picture circa 1440, and it'd be a picture of so-called white people being, essentially these so-called white people are attacking, what's it called? There you go. These so-called white people or Edomites are attacking dark-skinned people, their castles. It took me forever to get that out for some reason. But you see that picture, and that history was part of a prophecy that was written in Revelation chapter 20, if I remember correctly. I might have to go into that again. I haven't gone into that in a while, but I might today. But the point is we're going to forget who we are as a nation. So with that, with the forgetting comes also the remembering. And that is what we're seeing today. So let's go to Baruch, the 2nd chapter, because that's where that is spoken about. Baruch, chapter 2. Baruch chapter 2 and verse 28. It says, As thou spakest by thy servant Moses in the day when thou didst command him to write thy law before the children of Israel, saying, right, this is Baruch quoting Moses, quoting Deuteronomy. It says, If you will not hear my voice, surely this very great multitude shall be turned into a small nation, or into a small number. Let me skip the page. Right, surely this turn into a small number amongst the nations, where I will scatter them, for I knew that they would not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people, but in the land of their captivities they shall remember themselves. And that is the history of what we're seeing right now, is all these people worldwide are waking up to, who they truly are. And that's exactly, how it's been written. The whole thing with Russia, Iran, the US, all that has been straight Bible prophecy coming out of, Ezekiel. The 38th chapter talks about Gog, Magog. When you go into, Revelation 6, talks about how, the nuclear destruction, and so on and so forth. So all these things have been essentially, since the beginning, already written. You got the so-called Christians, and I say so-called because they're not really Christians. But you got the so-called Christians, taking straight points out of what the real Christians are bringing out. So it says, And shall know that I am Yahweh their power, for I will give them in hearts and ears to hear, and they shall praise me in the land of their captivity, and think upon my name. So in the places where we've been scattered, we're going to think upon the name of the Most High, which shows that we have the true name today. Not in no modern Hebrew, no Yeshua, no Yahweh. It's Yahweh and Yahushua. It says, And return from their stiff neck and from their wicked deeds, for they shall remember the way of their fathers, which sinned before Yahweh. Right? So what was the way of our forefathers? The commandments. And that's why you see all these people are talking about, keep the commandments, because this is happening. Whereas these so-called Christians never have been keeping the commandments. If anything, they say to not keep the commandments. And they say that we don't have to keep the commandments of the Old Testament because the Messiah, that's done away with now, which makes no sense, at all. But it says, and I will bring them again into the land which I promised with an oath unto their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they shall be lords of it, and I will increase them, and they shall not be diminished. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them to be their power. They shall be my people, and I will no more drive my people of Israel out of the land that I have given them. All right, so that's the end all be all, is the salvation, which when you read Revelation, the 11th chapter, that's what it talks about. Right after the waking up is the salvation, which, you know, that's why the Lord has me, the Lord has brothers out there doing the same thing. You know, coming out here week in, week out, is because we're proclaiming what's going to take place. So let's actually read that. Revelation 11. Revelation 11 and verse 12. So we're reading verse 11. It says, and after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from Yahweh entered into them, and they stood up upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Right, and that's going into the full-on salvation. Right after that waking up, it says that they heard a voice from heaven, and they ascended up in a cloud, which those clouds is going into the angels, really the vehicles of the angels, which would be the so-called UFOs. That's one of the great mysteries that, you know, this world hasn't really figured out. And there are some people that have figured it out. I'm talking about, you know, just your average Joe Schmo. For example, I remember watching a Netflix documentary over aliens, and the first clip was this so-called looking Edomite talking about the wheel inside of a wheel, and that they're the angels and Ezekiel. And I remember I was watching this, I'm like, this is straight on Netflix. You know, it's literally the truth is being told. But, you know, what Esau does is that he will speak the truth, you know, comically. He'll speak about it in a comical way so that nobody ever takes it, you know, serious, but it truly is straight facts. So, it says, in the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were afflighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Right, because the salvation is going to happen right before the destruction. Right, it's going to be hand in hand, you know, when that happens. Which, when it talks about that great earthquake, that's talked about in Isaiah 24. You know, it's all talk about that nuclear destruction. I believe it's Isaiah 24 or 26. It talks about the earth shaking, you know, reeling to and fro as a drunkard. Okay, Revelation 6, once again, it says that, you know, all the islands and mountains were moved out of their places. So this is all talking about, you know, one giant event. So, going back to Ezekiel 37, and I'm going to read verse 15, because now this goes into the breaking down of the sign, right? So the 12 tribe sign, where did that come from? Same chapter. Ezekiel 37 and verse 15, it says, the word of Yahweh came again unto me, saying, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel his companions. And join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. So when you go into that word stick, it goes into a plank, okay, a wooden plank. And it talks about Judah, and it talks about Joseph, okay, the stick of Ephraim. Which, if you understand, you know, if you read the Bible, it's talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Southern kingdom is referred to many times as Judah. The northern kingdom is referred to many times as Israel, as Ephraim, as Joseph. Right, so let's talk about unite these, you know, all 12 tribes and put it on this plank, okay, these sticks. It says, and when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, will thou not show us what thou meanest by these? Right, so the sign is supposed to get people to ask questions, right, to see the sign and say, what is that about? It says, say unto them, thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. And the sticks wherein thou ridest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. Right? So when you look at the history, Ezekiel never fulfilled this prophecy. There's no written account of Ezekiel having sticks in his hands and him doing this. This never happened. You know, this was a future prophecy which is happening right now. And when you read down, you know, it explains it why. It says, and say unto them, thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and will bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all, neither shall they defile themselves. And it goes on, but before I keep going, I want to get the point. This is what we're supposed to be telling the people today. Or that's right, but this is what was supposed to be said with those sticks, right? With that sign was that I'm going to save all the 12 tribes where they've been scattered, and instead of two kingdoms, I'm going to make them one and take them back to the Holy Land. That hasn't happened yet. So using some logic, there are supposed to be people today with signs of the 12 tribes speaking about how the Lord is going to unite and save the 12 tribes. And that's what you're seeing today. That's what's happening worldwide. That's why as time goes by, you know, the world is only going to, this message is only going to get bigger. And it's unstoppable, right? Because when you break out the prophecies, okay, the prophecies trump everything, okay? It explains everything. Here it is, perfect example. If somebody wants to talk to me about how the covenants and salvation is for everybody, I would just go into prophecy. I would go into Hebrews, the 8th chapter, where it talks about, hey, the covenant is only for the Israelites, right? And that the law, statutes, and commandments is going to be in their inward parts. How the Israelites are going to be pre-programmed with the law. They're not going to have to teach each other to not commit adultery and to not eat pork and to not do, you know, break the laws. We're not going to have to teach each other because it's going to be inside of us. But if you go, I would then jump to Isaiah 2, and it talks about how the nations are going to have to come to Jerusalem to learn the law because they're not part of that second covenant. So that right there, using straight prophecy, I quickly proved how all nations are not going to partake of the promises. And as it's written, it's only ever been for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this is why, you know, this gospel is, you can't stop it, because what's written is written. But let's keep going. It says, neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I will save them out of all their dwelling places wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their power. And David my servant shall be king over them, and they shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments, and observe my statutes, and do them. Right? Going into keeping the commandments. Another thing that comes to mind that is another, you know, fallacy, is the fact that we don't have to follow the commandments. The same thing, go to Isaiah, the 2nd chapter. It talks about how the laws are going to be established, are going to be pushed throughout the entire earth. So what sense does it make that today we don't got to follow the commandments, but in the future we will? You know, it makes no sense at all. When clearly the Messiah said, you know, be like me, you know, sin not. Okay? And that's very clearly putting it. It says in John, you know, if you love me, keep my commandments. So it says in Matthew 6, you know, whosoever shall, you know, teach one of these people to break the commandments shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever shall teach men to keep the commandments shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So those are just scriptures that come, you know, to the top of how, you know, we're supposed to do the best that we can. We're not going to do it perfectly. It's impossible to keep all the laws, but you have to do the best you can every single day. And that's all that matters, is intent. You know, if you're really in the sincere spirit of doing it, not just doing it, you know, for tradition, just doing it to do it. Because there's a difference between, you know, for example, you can fast every single day of your life, But if your intent is not correct, then it's essentially useless. But let's keep going to Ezekiel chapter 38 or 37 and verse 25. Let's finish this chapter. It says, "And they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Jacob my servant, wherein your fathers have dwelt, and they shall dwell therein, even they and their children and their children's children forever, and my servant David shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them, yea, I will be their power, and they shall be my people. And the heathen shall know that I, Yahweh, do sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore." Right, so these heathens, these other nations, are going to know that the Most High is only dealing with Israel. Okay, search up that word sanctify. It's only been Israel since the beginning. So that's very plainly put. And the thing that is difficult for a lot of people is to put their emotions to the side and accept what's written. You know, that's ultimately what it comes down to. There's a scripture that says that, you know, they go out to establish their own righteousness, you know, instead of submitting themselves to the righteousness of the Most High. Meaning, you want to do what you want to do. And it makes me think of another scripture, Ezekiel 33. Let's get this. Ezekiel 33 and verse 30. It says, caption or header says, God's judgment on the mockers. It says, "Also, thou son of man, the children of thy people still are talking against thee by the walls and in the doors of the houses, and speak one to another, every one to his brother, saying, Come, I pray you, and hear what is the word that cometh forth from Yahweh. And they come unto thee as the people cometh, and they sit before thee as my people, and they hear thy words, but they will not do them. For with their mouth they show much love, but their heart goeth after their covetousness." Right, so the world, you know, our people know what we're talking about. If you go on TikTok, you search up, you know, Hebrew Israelite, a lot of them are going to be incorrect. For example, you got your IUIC, your, you know, all these other camps, which the true message is coming out of GMS, if you can understand that. But you'll find, you know, all these podcasts, all these debates, you know, the world has already the idea of the Hebrew Israelites, of how the so-called Latinos, the Negroes, the Native Americans, as a collective, are the people of the Bible. So with that, you know, people know. And a perfect example was last week, you know, when I came, there was this, it was probably like a group of 4 or 5 that came over here, looked like Edomites. And I say they look like Edomites. And they didn't say nothing when they passed. But when they passed, you know, with their car, you know, he literally screamed how, you know, Jesus Christ loves white people too. Now, why would he say that? The reason is because he has heard, you know, and that's a, you know, if you go to my last live, I think I kind of explained, I think I explained on the video how, you know, that's a very loaded statement, and there's a lot of time to dissect there. You know, basically because so-called white people, you know, that's, you know, it's just a term. It's really Edomites. The second, yes, you know, your God, Jesus Christ, does love Edomites, but not Yahushai. And there's a very big separation. When you talk about Jesus Christ, that comes with a whole different doctrine. When you say Yahushai, that comes with what the Bible speaks of, the correct doctrine, okay? Because Jesus Christ, that doctrine is that God loves everybody. You know, you instantly think of that image of, you know, the blonde hair, the blue eyes, which people say, oh yeah, he obviously didn't look like that, but still, you know, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. That's what they say now. In the past, no, they said that's what he looks like, but now that we have confounded that, they say, oh, it doesn't really matter, you know? So that comes with the salvation for everyone doctrine. It comes with the Trinity doctrine. They believe that the Father, the Son, and the Most High are all just one, and they misunderstand the scripture that says that, right? It just means they all agree in one. They're all in one mindset, but they literally think that the Father is the Son, when there's many ways to confound that. For example, quick point is the fact that it says that the Son was praying to the Father. You know, how is that? Also says that only the Father knows the time, the Son doesn't know the time. That's another point. And you know, I could just keep going on about that. I want to stay at point really. The point. They're two different people. Okay? Jesus Christ is a false God. That comes with a false doctrine. And that's why I said that's a you'd have to dissect what he said. But the point is that people know, without going on, you know, too crazy of a tangent, which it's not really a tangent, it's all truth, but I want to stay in Ezekiel chapter 33 and verse 32. It says, "And lo, thou art unto them as a very lovely song of one that hath a pleasant voice, and can play well on an instrument. For they hear thy words, but they do them not." Right? So people understand, they've heard what is said. Keep the commandments the best you can. You know, pray, have faith. But they don't want to do that. They want to go after their own covetousness and do what they want to do. It says, "And when this cometh to pass, lo, will come, then shall they know that a prophet hath been among them." And that is what eventually we're going to see on a real global scale. Is that when these prophecies happen, who are people instantly going to think of? They're going to think about the men that were talking about those things. When people see the microchip, they're going to think about, damn, I remember this one guy was saying about the mark of the beast is the microchip. You know, let me see what he was talking about. But for a lot of people, it's going to be too late. You know, some people are going to wake up that way, you know, in the last second. Because it does say in Psalms 110 that in the day of thy power, thy people shall be willing. And when society really collapses, that's when people are going to be looking for answers. But for a lot of people, it's going to be, you know, too late. So let's get that point. That's the famine of the word, Amos 8. And then I think Proverbs, the first chapter, also speaks about that. There's a couple places that speak about that. The main one, Amos 8, in verse 11, it says, "Behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh. And they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of Yahweh, and shall not find it." Right? So why is that going to be? Because the way that the word goes out is through his men. Right? It says that in Hebrews 1:1 that God, who at sundry times, you know, spoke through his men. So there's always been a mediator. It says, Amos 8 and verse 11 or 12, "They shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of Yahweh, and shall not find it. In that day shall the fair virgins and the young men faint for thirst." Right? So it's going to be too late for a lot of people in that day. You're good. It's going to be too late. Right? Because right now is the time to get it. And now is when I want to hit Proverbs 1. That's what I was talking about. Right, Proverbs chapter 1. I think the live went out once again. I think it should be good now. But what I was reading is Proverbs 1 and verse 20 says, "Wisdom crieth without, she uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief place of concourse. In the openings of the gates in the city she uttereth her words, saying, How long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity, and the scorners delight in the scornings, and fools hate knowledge?" Right? Which, you know, what is wisdom crying out in the streets? In the chief places of concourse. That is the prophets, the men. Okay, teaching. That's what it's talking about. And what are they saying? How long, ye simple ones? How long are you people going to keep doing the same thing? Stay in that worldly mindset. You know, stuck, chasing something that, you know, when you reach, if you ever reach it, is never going to satisfy you. Okay? Because that's what people, you know, people of the world have already realized that. Oh, the rat race, the matrix. But they haven't found the actual solution, the answers as to what to do from there. And that's, you know, what we see right now is people don't got the answers. That's why you see Jake is stuck in Islam. You know, he chasing the Islam guy. He chasing Krishna. He chasing Buddha. Okay, he's stuck in the modern day Christian, interpretation of the Bible, which is false. Pentecostal, evangelical, whatever you want to go into. They're stuck in all these things, and they're not finding rest. They're not finding answers. That's why it says in Romans 11 that, Israel had not found that which he seeketh for, but the election hath obtained it, and the rest were blinded. Right? So the elect are going to find the truth, but the rest of our people, majority of them, are going to be blinded. They're not going to get it. And that's just the way the Most High has made it. So it says, Proverbs 1:23, turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you. I will make known my words unto you, because I have called and ye refused. I have stretched out my hand, and no man regarded. But ye have set at naught all my counsel, and with none of my reproof. Right, so here it is, the Most High is calling. The majority of you people are refusing. You don't want to humble down and accept the way of the Most High. It says, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your fear cometh. When your fear cometh as desolation, and your destruction cometh as a whirlwind, then when distress and anguish cometh upon you, then shall they call upon me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me early, but they shall not find me, for that they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of Yahweh. So when this happens, right, they're going to seek me. They're going to call upon me, but the Most High ain't going to answer you. You ain't going to be able to get it. He's going to mock at whatever you go through. Because you mocked at him, when he was going like this. So that's the time that eventually will come. And I think I said it last week how it's already started. In Canada, they have already passed the hate crime bill or something along those lines, hate speech bill, of how, if you speak anything considered hate, how, it's punishable lawfully for them. So imprisonment, which the Bible speaks about that. I believe it's Revelation 2 or Revelation 12:12. Talks about how the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. Roughly paraphrasing. So it's already written we're going to be persecuted, jailed up, because we're just speaking these words. And these words are contrary to what this world lives. It's contrary to what this kingdom believes in. Okay, we're literally preaching, prophesying about the downfall of this kingdom. So imagine when it actually starts falling, and the people that don't want it to fall, they're going to start pointing fingers as to why it's falling. They're going to start pointing fingers to no, those people are part of the problem because they're pushing for this place to fall. And those people are terrorists, and they're Islamists, and they're, all these, they're going to point the fingers to point. And for righteousness, for the testimony of Yahushua, we are going to go through all types of things. So that's why it says in Luke that, you got to count the cost. Okay, you got to know 100% what you believe in. Because it says in Sirach, the 2nd chapter, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation. Let me tell you, man, that's the truest statement. That's one of the truest things you can read, is prepare to go through some difficult times. Because it says that he that departed from evil maketh himself a prey. When you separate from that lifestyle, Satan is going to try to get you back into the lifestyle. That's why I believe it was King David said that, he was envious when he saw the prosperity of the wicked, right? I'm not sure if the word is envious, but he felt some type of way when he saw the wicked prospering, but their latter end is that they're going to perish regardless. But right now, the wicked prosper. You do wickedness, and you're going to have material success. Your life is not going to be as difficult because we live in the times of the wicked. Satan already got you where he wants you. So, and a perfect example of that is when, Yahushua, it says that Satan took Yahushua up to that exceeding mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world. And he said, bow down to me, and I will give you all these things. And obviously Yahushua is like, hey, I'm good. I'm roughly paraphrasing. Of course, he didn't say that, but the point is like, nah. But what does that show you? Is that if you worship the left-hand side, you will be increased in the material things, right? That's why all these so-called elites, these people with money, they do all those satanic rituals because they want more material benefits. They want more fame, more power, more money, right? And that is exactly what they get. So the flip of that is, what does it say? What will a man gain if he gain the world but lose his soul? And that's the thing, is that that's what people are not thinking about. Is that at the end of the day, go look at the story of Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh. When Aaron, changed his rod into a serpent, right? What did the wise men of Pharaoh do also? They also turned their rods into serpents by the way of the left-hand side. But what was the end conclusion? That Aaron's serpent ate the serpent of the wise men of Pharaoh, showing you that the right hand is always going to triumph. It's always going to come out on top. So it's the same thing today. And we can read about that. Let's go to Isaiah 47. I think it literally says that verbatim. Isaiah 47 and verse. So Isaiah 47 is all talking about, Babylon the Great. The caption literally says, or header says, God's judgment upon Babylon. So I'll start at verse 1. It says, "Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground, there's no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate." Right? The story, what's written, is that this place is going to fall. It doesn't matter what Trump does over there in Hormuz and Iran and whatever happens with that. This place eventually will be destroyed by nuclear missiles. Thus say the Holy Scriptures. So, jumping down, I want to hit the point. Jumping down to verse 8, it says, "Therefore hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly, that sayest in thine hearts, I am and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children." So that's the mentality of the people here, is that they're never going to see loss. They're never going to suffer. Everything's always going to be good. But that's not true. It says, "But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries and for the great abundance of thine enchantments." Right? So in one day, that's talking about the day those nukes drop, all of this is going to be completely wiped out. And the reason why this is going to happen is because the wickedness has gone up to extents it's never gone before. Okay, we live in the most wicked time that the world has ever seen. Okay, this is worse than what the Canaanites were doing, what any empire in the past was doing. This is the worst of the worst. And the technology has enabled that. Okay, here it is. There's men out there that if you were to look at them, they look exactly, like women. That is straight confusion. And that's what Babylon means. Babylon means the land of confusion. It goes back to the word Babel, which means confusion, and goes back to the Tower of Babel, where the languages were confused. So we live in a kingdom that is, everything's upside down, man. And it's only going to get worse. That's the scariest part, is that it's only going to get worse. And if we already think the things we see now are unbelievable, imagine what's going to come in the future. How unbelievable and satanic it's going to be. So it says, "For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness, thou hast said, none seeth me, that wisdom and thy knowledge it hath perverted thee, and thou hast said in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. Therefore shall evil come upon thee, thou shalt not know from whence it riseth, and mischief shall fall upon thee, thou shalt not be able to put it off, and desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know." Right? So this is going to go down in a way where you're not going to be able to point the finger and say it started with this. The same as when you look at the history of ancient Rome, it said that it fell, by multiple reasons. It wasn't just one thing. It was economic, political, religious, society, whatever thing. It was all combined in one to make it fall. So America being, Rome reincarnated, was going to be the same thing. Economic, things getting too expensive. Religiously, so much division between the American people, the left and the right. It's only going to intensify as things intensify in the world. Economic, religious, political, people seeing what the president is doing. So it's going to be a straight shit show what is about to take place. And it says that in Daniel 12 that it's going to be like a time never before seen. And what's coming is going to be worse than anything the world has ever experienced. So, verse 12 says, "Stand now with thine enchantments, and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth. If so be thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail." Right, so it's saying, okay, stand with all of your witchcraft. Let's see if you can protect yourself with all that witchcraft. Let's see if you can prevail with the left-hand side. It says, "Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers, the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Behold, they shall be as stubble. The fire shall burn them. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. They shall not be a coal to warm at, nor fire to sit before it." So, they're not going to be able to deliver themselves from the power of the flame, aka those nuclear missiles, when this happens, nor from the power of Yahushua and the angels. Showing you, at the end of the day, the left-hand side is not going to triumph. Sure, go ahead and sell out. Go do all this wickedness, but you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to suffer when these things happen. And there's no escaping it. Because this is a spiritual problem. There's no making money to, survive and what's coming. That's not it. It says that in Zephaniah 1 that neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of Yahweh. So your money ain't going to save you. The only thing that's going to save you is genuine faith. Let's go to Isaiah 60. Isaiah 65 and verse 12. It says, "Judgments of the wicked and blessings of the godly." It says, "Therefore will I number you to the sword, and shall all bow down to the slaughter, because when I called, ye did not answer, when I spake, ye did not hear, but did evil before mine eyes, and did choose that wherein I delighted not." So, all you people that, knowing you were supposed to do these things, still did it, okay, now you're going to pay. And that's the thing, is that people have forgotten the Most High. They think that the Most High is all loving and that everything is always good. But they don't read about the judgments and the things he has done. And there's a reason why, one of his names, when you go into, I believe it's the title, God Almighty, it goes into, in the Hebrew, Al-Shadia, which means a demon-like power. That word shad going into demon, right? So it says that the Lord was known through the judgments which he executed. Perfect. Another example was when you go into, I think it was, I forgot, I'm not sure if it was Jericho or what exactly city, but essentially where they set the spy and they came across the woman that was a harlot, and she essentially delivered her family, through telling these people what was going on, these Israelites. She said, "Yeah, we have heard of what the Most High has done in Egypt." And that's the thing, is that fear of the Most High was throughout the entire earth because of the judgment that he brought forth. So the same thing is about to take place. Okay, the Most High is about to establish his name once again and make known who he is. I have to go to Jeremiah chapter 16 and 14 to hit a point on that. One of my favorite scriptures. think it's been a while since I went into this one. Jeremiah. Let's see. It talks about how the Lord is gonna make. I think I'm live. Okay, I think the live is back. I'll quote it real quick just because I can't pull it up. I forgot exactly where it's at. It essentially says how the Lord will no longer is going to be called the Lord who saved the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord who saved the children of Israel out of all four corners of the earth and from the land of the north, right? Which the land of the north is talking about here. So the name of the Most High, he's about to receive a new title and a new exaltation is the point. So Isaiah 65 and verse 13, it says, "Therefore thus saith Yahweh, behold, my servant shall eat, but ye shall be hungry. Behold, my servant shall drink, but ye shall be thirsty. Behold, my servant shall rejoice, but ye shall be ashamed. Behold, my servant shall sing for joy of hearts, but ye shall cry for sorrow of heart, and shall howl for vexation of spirit." So when these things happen, somehow, some way, the elect are going to be able to find food, find water, find exactly what they need, and be in an up spirit, not down and depressed. And that's essentially going to be one of the main things that makes people realize that these men got something different. For example, Isaiah 4:1 talks about that in that day, 7 women shall take hold of 1 man. Right? It also says in Isaiah, I believe it's 32, or you can search it up, Isaiah 19, talks about how he will make a man more precious than the golden wedge of Ophir, okay, in these coming days. Okay, the way these women are gonna realize that these men are different is through the countenance. Okay, it's through the composure. Okay, there's a scripture that says that wisdom maketh the face of a man to shine. Okay, because your composure is different. So that's how they're gonna know. Okay, you're just gonna have a calm energy towards you. But the point is that his servants shall drink and rejoice, while you Israelites that didn't do right are gonna suffer. And that is gonna be the case for everyone that didn't believe. So I'll finish it with this. Been finishing it with this pretty recently. One of my also favorite scriptures, 2 Ezra 16. 2 Ezra 16 and verse 70. Verse 70. So, 2 Ezra chapter 16 and verse 70 says, "For there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear Yahweh. They shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear Yahweh." Right? And who are those that fear Yahweh? The Israelites. Okay? Even if it's just a little bit, every single Israelite got a little bit of the fear of the Lord inside of them. But it's just not the right way. For example, it says in Romans that my people have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. Right? They believe in the Most High, but they ain't doing it the right way. And that's why you see all our people in those churches. And you just look at them, and you can see that zeal, man. You can see they really believe, but it's not the right way. So it says, they shall be like madmen, sparing none. Okay, I think it's good now. So, as I was reading, it says, "Then shall they be known who are my chosen, and they shall be tried as the gold in the fire." So we gonna see who really believes when you can't find food easily, when you can't find water easily, when things are tight, when you're being persecuted for your belief. Okay? We're gonna see who really believes when that fire comes upon you. It says, "Hear, O ye my beloved, saith Yahweh, behold, the days of trouble are at hand, but I will deliver you from the same. Be ye not afraid, neither doubt, for Yahweh is your God. and the guide of them who will keep my commandments and precepts, saith Yahweh. Let not your sins weigh you down, and let not your iniquities lift up themselves. So, the Most High is the guide of those that keep His commandments. And it tells us clearly it's not doubt, not fear, when these things happen, because ultimately He is the one that is fully in control. And when you think in that mindset, that's when all your anxiety, completely vanishes, because you realize that you're putting it in His hands and that it's never been in your hands to begin with. So there's nothing to worry about. Have faith. Do the best you can every single day. That's your works. And just endure. Endure no matter what happens. And as it says, don't let your sins weigh you down. If you fall, hey, don't let it weigh you down. Just get back up. Okay? Improve. Don't repeat the same offense, if possible. And it says, let our iniquities lift up themselves. So don't let that wickedness get to a point, don't let it get up, essentially. Don't be wicked. So if you fall, get back up and do the best you can every single day to get better is the point. So that's it for me today. Hopefully that was edifying. With that, I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rakapadash, and double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Shalom to you, elect. Shalom.